Shri Bhaktivedanta Narayan Gosai Maharaj Shri Gurudev Ki Jai. Nityalapa Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shri Bhaktivedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai. Nityalapa Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nityalapa Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shri Bhakti Vigyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai. Nityalapa Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nityalapa Vishnu Mahārāja Shri Bhaksharadas Prabhuji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nityalapa Vishnu Shri Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nityalapa Vishnu Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannath Das Prabhuji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupano Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Padadasha Gunath Shar Gosai Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai. Namachay Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Vaja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishtapadata Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Gaur. Vandeham, sorry. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana. Oh wait, I forgot. Nityalapa Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shila Bhakti Vallabha Tirtha Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai. Tadiya Shubha Tirubhav Titi Ki Jai. Titi Palankari Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shinitai Gaur Premanande Hari. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad-Bhakti Vedanta Narayaniti Namine. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Yudhvādaya Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Narvaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam Dvaipayano viraha katara ajuhavo Putreti tanmayataya taravo bhinedu Stang sarva bhuta hridaya munimanatosmi. Narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam Devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye. Shrinvatang swakata Krishna punya shavana kirtana Hridantasto yabatrani vidhunoti suritsatam. Nashta prayeshvavadrishu nityam bhagavat sevaya Bhagavatutamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. Tavai vasmi na jivami tvaya vina. Iti vigyaya radhe tvam nayamam charanantikam. Bhaktya vihina aparada lakshay kshiptashtaka madhitaranga madhe. Kripa maitam sharanam prapanna vrinde namaste charana ravindam. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dandavat pranams Prajumna Prabhu, Indira Mataji, Madhavi Didi, Gargaraj, Rup Manjari. Dandavat pranams to all of you. Okay, so yesterday, what did we read yesterday? Can't remember which. We read from 23 to 46. Okay. So, the appearance of Pṛthu and Archita. We read about that. After churning the two arms of King Bena, a male and female appeared. And the sages spoke, Pṛthu and Archi are partial representations of the Lord and his eternal consort Lakshmi. Oh wait, we read this whole chapter, didn't we? Yeah, we did. Okay, so the sages then turned the two arms of King Vain's dead body, from which a male and female couple appeared. The learned sages were pleased to see the couple. They understood that an empowered incarnation of Lord Vishnu, Shaktivesh, had appeared. Thus they spoke. The sages speak about Pṛthu and Archi. The male, Pṛthu, is a plenary expansion of the power of Vishnu, who maintains the world. The female, Archi, is a plenary expansion of Lakshmi, who is never separated from the Lord. Pṛthu will be the first among kings, and his reputation will expand widely. Archi, endowed with beauty that beautifies the ornament she wears, will accept King Pṛthu as her husband. The Lord and Shri appeared. The Lord has appeared as King Pṛthu to protect the people of the world. Shri, the Lord's constant companion, has partially incarnated as Archi to become King Pṛthu's queen. Jubilation of Pṛthu's appearance. They're both Shaktivesh avatars, so Pṛthu and Archi. At that time, the Brahmins praised King Pṛthu. Gandharvas sang his glories. Siddhas showered flowers, and the Apsaras danced in ecstasy. Conches, bugles, drums, kettle drums vibrated all over outer space. Great sages, forefathers, and personalities from heavenly planets arrived. Lord Brahma arrived there along with the demigods. Seeing the marks of the club on King Pṛthu's right hand and on the lotus on his feet, Lord Brahma could understand that King Pṛthu was the Lord's partial representation. Note, before accepting someone as an incarnation of God, one should verify his identity according to the symptoms mentioned in the Shastras. Okay, Coronation of Frutu. The learned Brahmins then arranged for King Pṛthu's coronation. People collected different paraphernalia for the ceremony. All the rivers, seas, hills, mountains, serpents, cows, birds, animals, the sky, the earth, and all living entities collected various presentations to offer the king. King Pṛthu was exquisitely dressed and coronated. Together with his well-ornamented wife Archi, they appeared exactly like fire. Various personalities offered gifts to King Pṛthu. Kuvera offered a golden royal throne, Varuna an umbrella, Vayu 2 chamars, Dharma a flower garland which would expand his fame, Indra an excellent crown, Yama a scepter to rule the world, Brahma armor made of spiritual knowledge, Saraswati a transcendental necklace, Lord Hari Sudarshan chakra, not the original Sudarshan chakra, that was like a, yeah. Lakshmi, imperishable opulences. One second. Lord Shiva, a sword marked with 10 moons. Durga, a shield marked with 100 moons. Soma, horses made of nectar. Vishvakarma, a beautiful chariot. Agni, a bow made of the horns of goats and cows. Surya, arrows as brilliant as sunshine. Bhumi, slippers with magic power. Those slippers are so cool. Those are my favorite out of all the things I got. They could like, they worked like, they were like hover slippers. You could just
put his feet in them and then he could like float around. Demigods, flowers, again and again. Flowers from the heavenly planets also, those must have been really awesome. Ketrada, drama, singing, music, and the power to disappear. Sages, infallible blessings. Ocean, the conch. Seas, mountains, and rivers, a path for his chariot. And the bards, prayers and praises. So we ended with the bard. Okay. Then Pṛthu's grave speech. Seeing the professional bards, the Sutta, Magadha, and Vandi, praise him, the greatly powerful Pṛthu smiled and with the gravity of thundering clouds spoke as follows. O gentle Sutta, Magadha, and Vandi, how can these qualities be directed to me as I have not yet displayed them? Then the bards might say, what fault is there if we praise you? And now Pṛthu is saying, your words, no. If I do not display these qualities, your words will go in vain, and you will incur sins. So it is better that they be offered to someone else. Then the bards might say, all these qualities will become manifest in the future, though. Then glorify me in the future when I exhibit those qualities in my absence. Then the bards might say, what should we do? Inspired by the assembly, we have begun to glorify you. Then Pṛthu says, the gentle should offer prayers to the Lord and not to a low human like me. And the bards might say, but you are the Supreme Lord, worthy of praise. And then Pṛthu says, how can a person allow his followers to praise him for his future qualities and activities? Such praise is simply cheating or an insult. Saintly, modest, and magnanimous persons do not like to hear themselves praised. They consider it a criticism of their abilities. Right now, I am not very famous for my personal activities. Therefore, how could I engage you in praising me for those activities? Now, the bards glorify Pṛthu Mahārāja. Looks like they're not heeding his words. Today, the bards are going to double down on this Swadharma. Yep. Okay. Oh, shoot, I forgot to open up the page. 1 second. Yeah. What is it? Chapter 16. Okay. Maitreya uvacha iti brahvanam nripatem kaya kamoni chodita tuštuvus tuštamanasas tarvagamrita sevaya. The great sage Maitreya continued, while King Pṛthu thus spoke, the humility of his nectarian speeches pleased the reciters very much. Then, again, they continued to praise the king highly with exalted prayers, as they had been instructed by the great sages. Purport. Here the word Muni Chodita indicates instructions received from great sages and saintly persons. Although Maharaj Pṛthu was simply enthroned on the royal seat and was not at that time exhibiting his godly powers, the reciters like the Sutta, the Magadha, and the Vandi understood that King Pṛthu was an incarnation of God. They could understand this by the instructions given by the great sages and learned Brahmins. We have to understand the incarnations of God by the instructions of authorized persons. We cannot manufacture a God by our own concoctions. As stated by Narottam Das Thakur, Sadhu Shastra Guru, one has to test all spiritual matters according to the instructions of saintly persons, scriptures, and the spiritual master. The spiritual master is one who follows the instruction of his predecessors, namely the sadhus or saintly persons. A bona fide spiritual master does not mention anything not mentioned in the authorized scriptures. Ordinary people have to follow the instructions of sadhu, shastra, and guru. Those statements made in the shastras and those made by the bona fide sadhu or guru cannot differ from one another. Reciters like the Sutta and the Magadha were confidentially aware that King Pṛthu was an incarnation of the personality of Godhead. Although the king denied such praise because he was not at that time exhibiting his godly qualities, the reciters did not stop praising him. Rather, they were very pleased with the king, who, although actually an incarnation of God, was so humble and delightful in his dealings with the devotees. In this connection, we may note that previously, in the previous chapter, verse 21, it was mentioned that Pṛthu was smiling and was in a pleasant mood while speaking to the reciters. Thus, we have to learn from the Lord or his incarnation how to become gentle and humble. The king's behavior was very pleasing to the reciters, and consequently, the reciters continued their praise and even foretold the king's future activities, as they've been instructed by the sadhus and sages. 1 second, just want to check one thing. Okay. Nalam vayam te mahimanu varnane yodeva varyo vatata ramayaya venangajatasya chaporushanite vachaspati nam api babramurdiya. 1 second, I just want to drink some water. The reciters continued. Dear King, you are a direct incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, and by his causeless mercy you have descended on this earth. Therefore, it is not possible for us to actually glorify your exalted activities. Although you have appeared through the body of King Vena, even great orators and speakers like Lord Brahma and other demigods cannot exactly describe the glorious activities of your lordship. Purport. In this verse, the word Mayaya means by a causeless mercy. The Mayavadi philosophers explain the word Maya as meaning illusion or falseness. However, there is another meaning of Maya, that is, causeless mercy. There are two kinds of Maya, Yoga Maya and Mahamaya. Mahamaya is an expansion of Yoga Maya, and both these Mayas are different expressions of the Lord's internal potencies. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord appears through his internal potencies, Atma Mayaya. We should therefore reject the Mayavad explanation that the Lord appears in a body given by the external potency, the material energy. The Lord and his incarnation are fully independent and can appear anywhere and everywhere by virtue of the internal potency. Although born of the so-called dead body of King Vena, King Pṛthu was still an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the Lord's internal potency. The Lord can appear in any family. Sometimes he appears as a fish incarnation, or a Matsya avatar, or a boar incarnation, Varaha avatar. Thus the Lord is completely free and independent to appear anywhere and everywhere by his internal potency. It is stated that Ananta, an incarnation of the Lord who has unlimited mouths, cannot reach the end of his glorification of the Lord, although Ananta has been describing the Lord since time immemorial. So what to speak of demigods like Brahma, Lord Shiva, and others? It is said that the Lord is Shiva Virinchi Nutam, always worshipped by demigods like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. If the demigods cannot find adequate language to express the qualities of the Lord, then what to speak of others? Consequently, reciters like the Sutta and Magadha felt inadequate to speak about King Pṛthu. By glorifying the Lord with exalted verses, one becomes purified. Although we are unable to offer prayers to the Lord in an adequate fashion, our duty is to make the attempt in order to purify ourselves. It is not that we should stop our glorification because demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva cannot adequately glorify the Lord. Rather, as stated by Pṛthu Mahārāja, everyone should glorify the Lord according to his own ability. If we are serious and sincere devotees, the Lord will give us the intelligence to offer prayers properly. Just like we read previously, how the Lord touched his conch shell to Dhruva Mahārāja so that he could offer prayers. Atapya udara shavasa prittor hare kalavatarasya katamrita trita yato padesham munibhi prachodita shlagyani karmani vayam vitanmahi. Although we are unable to glorify you adequately, we nonetheless have a transcendental taste for glorifying your activities. We shall try to glorify you according to the instructions received from authoritative sages and scholars. Whatever we speak, however, is always inadequate and very insignificant. Dear King, because you are a direct incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all your activities are liberal and ever laudable. Purport. However expert one may be, he can never describe the glories of the Lord adequately. Nonetheless, those engaged in glorifying the activities of the Lord should try to do so as far as possible. Such an attempt will please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya has advised all his followers to go everywhere and preach the message of Lord Krishna. Since this message is essentially Bhagavad Gita, the preacher's duty is to study Bhagavad Gita as it is understood by disciplic succession and explained by great sages and learned devotees. One should speak to the general populace in accordance with one's predecessors, sadhu, guru, and shastras. This simple process is the easiest method by which one can glorify the Lord. Devotional service, however, is the real method, for by devotional service, one can satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead with just a few words. Without devotional service, volumes of books cannot satisfy the Lord. Even though preachers of the Krishna consciousness movement may be unable to describe the glories of the Lord, they can nonetheless go everywhere and request people to chant Hare Krishna. Esha dharma pratam shreshto lokam dharme nuvartayan gopta cha dharma setunam shasta tat paripantinam. This king, Maharaj Pṛthu, is the best amongst those who are following religious principles. As such, he will engage everyone in the pursuit of religious principles and give those principles all protection. He will also be a great chastiser to the irreligious and atheistic. Purport. The duty of the king or the head of the government is described very nicely in this verse. It is the duty of the governmental head to see that people strictly follow a religious life. A king should also be strict in chastising the atheists. In other words, an atheistic or godless government should never be supported by a king or governmental chief. That is the test of good government. In the name of secular government, the king or governmental head remains neutral and allows people to engage in all sorts of irreligious activities. In such a state, people cannot be happy despite all economic development. However, in this age of Kali, there are no pious kings. Instead, rogues and thieves are elected to head the government. But how can the people be happy without religion and God consciousness? The rogues exact taxes from the citizens for their own sense enjoyment, and in the future, the people will be so much harassed that according to the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, they will flee from their homes and country and take shelter in the forest. However, in Kali Yuga, democratic government can be captured by Krishna-conscious people. If this can be done, the general populace can be made very happy. Srila Prabhupada he was like the ultimate optimist. I mean, like in a very positive way. I guess optimist, positive, same thing. But yeah. Esha vai lokapalanam bibarte kastano tanu kale kale yata bhagam lokayor ubhayor hitam. This king alone in his own body will be able to this king alone in his own body will be able in due course of time to maintain all living entities and keep them in a pleasant condition by manifesting himself as different demigods to perform various departmental activities. Thus he will maintain the upper planetary system by inducing the populace to perform Vedic sacrifices. In due course of time, he will also maintain this earthly planet by discharging proper rainfall. Purport. The demigods in charge of the various departmental activities that maintain this world are but assistants to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When an incarnation of Godhead descends on this planet, demigods like the sun god, the moon god, or the king of heaven, Indra, all join him. Consequently, the incarnation of Godhead is able to act for the departmental demigods to keep the planetary systems in order. The protection of the earthly planet is dependent on proper rainfall, and as stated in Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures, sacrifices are performed to please those demigods who are in charge of rainfall. Anarbhavanti bhutani parjanya ranasambhava yagyar bhavati parjanyo yagya karma samudbhava. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yagya, sacrifice, and yagya is born of prescribed duties. Bhagavad Gita 3:14. Thus, the proper execution of yagya, sacrifice, is required. As indicated herein, King Pṛthu alone would induce all the citizens to engage in such sacrificial activities so that there would not be scarcity or distress. In Kali Yuga, however, in the so-called secular state, the executive branch of government is in charge of so-called kings and presidents who are all fools and rascals, ignorant of the intricacies of nature's causes and ignorant of the principles of sacrifice. Such rascals simply make various plans which always fail, and the people subsequently suffer disturbances. To counteract this situation, the Shastras advise, Harer Nama, Harer Nameva Kevalam, Kalo Nasteva Gatir Anyata. Thus, in order to counteract this unfortunate situation in government, the general populace is advised to chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vasukala upadatte kale chayam vimunchati sama sarveshu bhuteshu pratapan suryavad vibhu. This King Pṛthu will be as powerful as the sun god, and just as the sun god equally distributes his sunshine to everyone, King Pṛthu will distribute his mercy equally. Similarly, just as the sun god evaporates water for 8 months and, during the rainy season, returns it profusely, this king will also exact taxes from the citizens and return these monies in the times of need. Purport. The process of tax exaction is very nicely explained in this verse. Tax exaction is not meant for sense gratification of the so-called administrative heads. Tax revenues should be distributed to the citizens in times of need, during emergencies such as famine or flood. Tax revenues should not be distributed amongst governmental servants in the form of high salaries and various other allowances. In Kali Yuga, however, the position of the citizens is very horrible because taxes are exacted in so many forms and are spent for the personal comforts of the administrators, especially on war. My God, that's like where the majority goes. I guess that's also for that doesn't help the people, that just helps the administrators also. The example of the sun in this verse is very appropriate. The sun is many millions of miles away from the earth, and although the sun does not actually touch the earth, it manages to distribute land all over the planet by exacting water from the oceans and seas, and it also manages to make that land fertile by distributing water during the rainy season. As an ideal king, King Pṛthu would execute all this business in the village and state as expertly as the sun. Tatikshatya kraman vainya uparyakramatam api bhutanam karuna shashvar artanam kshiti vrittiman. This King Pṛthu will be very, very kind to all citizens. Even though a poor person may trample all over the king's head by violating the rules and regulations, the king, out of his causeless mercy, will be forgetful and forgiving. As a protector of the world, he will be as tolerant as the earth itself. Purport. King Pṛthu is herein compared to the earthly planet as far as his tolerance is concerned. Although the earth is always trampled upon by men and animals, it still gives food to them by producing grains, fruits, and vegetables. As an ideal king, Maharaj Pṛthu is compared to the earthly planet, for even though some citizens might violate the rules and regulations of the state, he would still be tolerant and maintain them with fruits and grains. In other words, it is the duty of the king to look after the comforts of the citizens, even at the cost of his own personal convenience. This is not the case, however, in Kali Yuga, for in Kali Yuga, the kings and heads of state enjoy life at the cost of taxes exacted from the citizens. Such unfair taxation makes the people dishonest, and the people try to hide their income in so many ways. Eventually, the state will not be able to collect taxes and consequently will not be able to meet its huge military and administrative expenses. Everything will collapse and there will be chaos and disturbance all over the state. Deve varshattaso devo naradeva vapurhari kritra prana prajahyesha rakshishyatanjasindravat. When there is no rainfall and the citizens are in great danger due to the scarcity of water, this royal personality of Godhead will be able to supply rains exactly like the heavenly king Indra. Thus he'll very easily be able to protect the citizens from drought. Purport. King Pṛthu is very appropriately compared to the sun and that demigod Indra. King Indra of the heavenly planets is in charge of distributing water over the earth and over other planetary systems. It is indicated that King Pṛthu would arrange for the distribution of rainfall personally if Indra failed to discharge his duty properly. Sometimes the king of heaven, Indra, would become angry at the inhabitants of the earth if they did not offer sacrifices to appease him. King Pṛthu, however, being an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, did not depend on the mercy of the heavenly king. It is foretold herein that if there would be a scarcity of rain, King Pṛthu would manage to counteract the deficiency by virtue of his godly powers. Such powers were also exhibited by Lord Krishna when he was present in Vrindavan. Indeed, when Indra poured incessant water on Vrindavan for 7 days, the inhabitants were protected by Krishna, who raised Govardhan Hill over their heads as a great umbrella. Thus, Lord Krishna is known as Govardhanthari. Apyayayattaso lokam vadanamritamurtina sanuragavalokena vishada smitacharuna. This king, Pṛthu Mahārāja, by virtue of his affectionate glances and beautiful moon-like face, which is always smiling with great affection for the citizens, will enhance everyone's peaceful life. Avyaktavartmaisha nigodakaryo gambhira vedha upagupta vitta anantamahatma gunaikadhama Pṛthu pracheta iva samvritatma. The reciters continued, No one will be able to understand the policies the king will follow. His activities will also be very confidential, and it will not be possible for anyone to know how he will make every activity successful. His treasury will always remain unknown to everyone. He will be the reservoir of unlimited glories and good qualities, and his position will be maintained and covered, just as Varuna, the deity of the seas, how the deity of the seas is covered all around by water. Sorry, I read that bad. Purport. There is a predominating deity for all the material elements, and Varuna, or Pracheta, is the predominating deity of the seas and the oceans. From outward appearances, the seas and oceans are all devoid of life, but a person acquainted with the sea knows that within the water exist many varieties of life. The king of that underwater kingdom is Varuna. Just as no one can understand what is going on beneath the sea, no one could understand what policy King Pṛthu is following to make everything successful. Indeed, King Pṛthu's path of diplomacy was very grave. His success was made possible because he was a reservoir of unlimited glorified qualities. The word Upagupta Vita is very significant in this verse. It indicates that no one would know the extent of the riches King Pṛthu would confidentially keep. The idea is that not only the king, but everyone should keep his hard-earned money confidentially and secretly, so that in due course of time, the money can be spent for good, practical purposes. Okay? In Kali Yuga, however, the king or government has no well-protected treasury, and the only means of circulation is currency notes made of paper. Thus, in times of distress, the government artificially inflates the currency by simply printing papers. And this artificially raises the price of commodities, and the general condition of the citizens becomes very precarious. Thus, keeping one's money very secretly is an old practice, for we find this practice present even during the reign of Mahārāja Pṛthu. Just as the king has the rights to keep his treasury confidential and secret, the people should also keep their individual earnings a secret. There is no fault in such dealings. The main point is that everyone should be trained in the system of Varnashram Dharma so that the money is spent only for good causes and nothing else. I always try to be really transparent with money, so maybe I shouldn't be so transparent. Anyhow, Durasado Durvishaha Asanopi Viduravat Naiva Bhavitum Shakyo Venaranyutito Nala. I like to be transparent with money, though, so that I'm held accountable and I can't get away with misusing it. Anyhow. Translation. King Pṛthu was born of the dead body of King Vena, as fire is produced from arani wood. Thus, King Pṛthu will always remain just like fire, and his enemies will not be able to approach him. Indeed, he'll be unbearable to his enemies, for although staying very near him, they will never be able to approach him, but will have to remain as if far away. No one will be able to overcome the strength of King Pṛthu. Purport. Arani wood is a kind of fuel used to ignite fire by friction. At the time of performing sacrifices, one can ignite a fire from arani wood. Although born of his dead father, King Pṛthu will still remain just like fire. Just as fire is not easily approached, King Pṛthu would be unapproachable by his enemies, even though they would appear to be very near to him. Antarbahishcha bhutanam pashyam karmani charanai udasina iva dhyaksho vayur atmeva dehinam. King Pṛthu will be able to see all the internal and external activities of every one of his citizens. Still, no one will be able to know his system of espionage, and he himself will remain neutral regarding all matters of glorification or vilification paid to him. He'll be exactly like air, the life force within the body, which is exhibited internally and externally, but is always neutral to all affairs. I always wondered what espionage means. Oh, let me see. Because of the Espionage Act, which they used to... the practice of spying or using spies, typically by governments to obtain political and military information. Okay. Yeah, okay, because they use the Espionage Act to... to indict, what's his name? Snowden and Assange. Nandyam dandaryatesha sutamatma dishamapi dandayatatmajam api dandyam dharma pate stita. Since this king will always remain on the path of piety, he will be neutral to both his son and the son of his enemy. If the son of his enemy is not punishable, he will not punish him, But if his own son is punishable, he will immediately punish him. Purport. These are the characteristics of an impartial ruler. It is the duty of a ruler to punish the criminal and give protection to the innocent. King Pṛthu was so neutral that if his own son were punishable, he would not hesitate to punish him. On the other hand, if the son of his enemy were innocent, he would not engage in some intrigue in order to punish him. Very important for any leader to be neutral towards his own family members even. Asya pratihatam chakram pritur amanasa chalat vartate bhagavan arko yavatta patigo ganai. Just as the sun god expands his shining rays up to the Arctic region without impedance. Being impeded. Okay. The influence of King Pṛthu will cover all tracts of land up to the Arctic region and will remain undisturbed as long as he lives. Purport. Although the Arctic region is not visible to ordinary persons, the sun shines there without impediment. Just as no one can check sunshine from spreading all over the universe, no one could check the influence and reign of King Pṛthu, which would remain undisturbed as long as he lived. The conclusion is that the sunshine and the sun god cannot be separated, nor could King Pṛthu and his ruling strength be separated. His rule over everyone would continue without disturbance. Thus the king could not be separated from his ruling power. Ranjayishyati allokam ayamatma vicheshtitaya atamung ahurajanam manoranjanakai praja. This king will please everyone by his practical activities, and all of his citizens will remain very satisfied. Because of this, the citizens will take great satisfaction in accepting him as their ruling king. Dridavrata satyasandho brahmanyo vridasevaka sharanya sarvabhutanam manado dinavatsala. The king will be firmly determined and always situated in truth. He will be a lover of the Brahminical culture and will render all service to old men and give shelter to all surrendered souls. Giving respect to all, he will always be merciful to the poor and innocent. Purport. The word Vriddha Sevaka is very significant. Vriddha means old men. There are two kinds of old men. One is old by age, and another is old by knowledge. This Sanskrit word indicates that one can be older by the advancement of knowledge. King Pṛthu was very respectful to the Brahmins, and he protected them. He also protected persons advanced in age. Whatever the king would decide to do, no one would be able to stop. That is called Dridha Sankalpa, or Dridha Vrata. Matri Bhakti Parastrishu Patnyam Arda Ivatmana Prajasu Pitrivat Snigda Kinkaro Brahmavadinam. The king will respect all women as if they were his own mother, and he will treat his own wife and as the other half of his body. He will be just like an affectionate father to his citizens, and he will treat himself as the most obedient servant of the devotees, who always preach the glories of the Lord. Purport. A learned man treats all women except his wife as his mother, looks at others' property as garbage in the street, and treats others as if he would treat his own self. These are the symptoms of a learned person as described by Chanakya Pandit. This should be the standard for education. Education does not mean having academic degrees only. One should execute what one has learned, what he has learned in his personal life. These learned characteristics were verily manifest in the life of King Pṛthu. Although he was the king, he treated himself as a servant to the Lord's devotees. According to Vedic etiquette, if a devotee came to a king's palace, the king would immediately offer his own seat to him. The word Brahmavadinam is very significant. Brahmavadi refers to the devotees of the Lord. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are all different terms for the Supreme Brahman. And the Supreme Brahman is Lord Krishna. This is accepted in Bhagavad Gita 10.12 by Arjuna. Param Brahma Param Dhama. Thus the word Brahmavadinam refers to the devotees of the Lord. The state should always serve the devotees of the Lord, and the ideal state should conduct itself according to the instructions of the devotee. Because King Pṛthu followed this principle, he is highly praised. Dehinam atmavat preshta suhridam nandivardhana mukta sangha prasangoyam dandapanir asadushu. The king will consider all embodied living entities as dear as his own self, and he will always be increasing the pleasures of his friends. He will intimately associate with liberated persons, and he'll be a chastising hand to all impious persons. Purport. The word Dehinam refers to those who are embodied. The living entities are embodied in different forms, which number 8,400,000 species. All of these were treated by the king in the same way he would treat himself. In this age, however, so-called kings and presidents do not treat all other living entities as their own self. Most of them are meat eaters, and even though they may not be meat eaters and may pose themselves to be very religious and pious, they still allow cow slaughter within their state. Such sinful heads of state cannot actually be popular at any time. Another significant word in this verse is mukta sangha prasanga, which indicates that the king was always associating with liberated persons. Ayang tu shakshar bhagavang tradisha kutasta atma kalaya batirna yasmin avidya rachitam nirartakam pashyanti nanatvam api pratiptam. This king is the master of the three worlds, and he is directly empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is without change, and he is an incarnation of the Supreme, known as Shaktivesh Avatar. Being a liberated soul and completely learned, he sees all material varieties as meaningless because of their basic principle. He sees all material varieties as meaningless because their basic principle is nescience. We're ending with this verse. Purport. The reciters of these prayers are describing the transcendental qualities of Pṛthu Mahārāja. These qualities are summarized in the words Shakshad Bhagavan. This indicates that Mahārāja Pṛthu is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore possesses unlimited good qualities. Being an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mahārāja Pṛthu could not be equaled in his excellent qualities. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is fully equipped with 6 kinds of opulences, and King Pṛthu was also empowered in such a way that he could display these 6 opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in full. The word kutastha, meaning without change, is also very significant. There are 2 kinds of living entities, Nitya Mukta and Nitya Bhatta. A Nitya Mukta never forgets his position as the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who does not forget this position and knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord is Nitya Mukta. Such a Nitya Mukta living entity represents the Supersoul as its expansion. As stated in the Vedas, Nityo Nityanam. Thus, the Nitya Mukta living entity knows that he is an expansion of the Supreme Nitya, or the eternal Supreme Personality of Godhead. Being in such a position, he sees the material world with a different vision. The living entity who is Nitya Baddha, or eternally conditioned, sees the material varieties as being actually different from one another. In this connection, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 5.18, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavihastini Shuni Chaiva Swapakecha Pandita Samadarshina. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahman, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater outcast. Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress, and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of nescience, avidya rachitam. Being a Shaktivesh avatar, empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Pṛthu Mahārāja did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. All right, it's almost 8 o'clock, so we'll end here. And I think tomorrow is the future, right? Prediction of Pṛthu's future activities. That's verse 20 and 21. And then, so we'll read verse 20 and 21, and then we will read about how Mahārāja Pṛthu becomes angry at the earth. Vidura's further inquiries. Pṛthu offers gifts and respects to all and satisfies them. Vidura inquires about Pṛthu. Then King Pṛthu chastises the earth in the form of a cow. Hungry citizens approach Pṛthu and submit their petition. Pṛthu contemplates and decides to attack earth. Earth ran in the form of a cow out of fear. Angry Pṛthu chases the earth everywhere. Finally, she turns to him, and the earth's reasons not to be killed. Then Pṛthu's counter-arguments to the earth. Then the earth offers prayers to pacify Pṛthu. Right. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Sorry. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju ki Jai. Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju ki Jai. Nitil Bhavishto Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Srila Gurudev ki Jai. Nitil Bhavishto Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Nitil Bhavishto Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Nitil Pavishram Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj ki Jai.
It's 8 o'clock.
Nitil Pavishram Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki Jai. Nitil Pavishram Mahā-Bhagavat Srila Bhakshadas Babaji Maharaj ki Jai. Nitil Pavishram Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki Jai. Nitil Pavishram Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki Jai. Shri Rupano Gauriya Guru Varga ki Jai. Nitil Pavishram Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Ballabha Tirtha Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Tadiya Shubha Tirava Titi ki Jai. Nitil Pavishra Srila Bhakti Dait Madhav Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Nitil Pavishra Mishpad Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Bhatta Dashagunath Sharda Goswami Prabhu ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki Jai. Namachay Shri Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaur Mandal Braja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj ki Jai. Shri Radha Kunda Shama Kund ki Jai. Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai, Shri Bhakti Devi ki jai, Shri Purnamasi Yogamaya ki jai, Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Shri King Pṛthu ki jai, Pṛthu Mahārāja ki jai, Shri Archi Devi ki jai, Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shinitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Vrindaya Tulsi Devaya Priyaya Keshivashacha Krishna Bhakti Pradidevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyashta Kripa Sindhubhyai Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Oh, and Rup Manjari said that Guru Maharaj is also very transparent. Some things depend on time, place, and circumstance. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that we have to consider social norms. Yes, that is true. I agree fully. I agree fully with that. All right, Jai Shri Radhe. Dandavat pranams to all of you. Very well. And tonight we will, I think what we'll do is, because I started the series, The Most Compassionate Avatar by Srila Prabhupada that he wrote in 1956 for Gaudiya Patrika. So yesterday we read part 1. I think today we'll read part 2. And we'll also read something about Srila Bhakti Vallabha Tirtha Goswami Maharaj for his disappearance today. Rup Manjari sent me something to read, so I will read that. And so see you in the evening if you want to join that. Otherwise, see you tomorrow morning. Hari Bol.